one of the most famous Nazis. His name was Otto Skorzeny. He was Hitler's favorite commando fighter. He was the guy who rescued Mussolini from the top of the mountain and brought him to Hitler. He smuggled to South America all the notorious Nazis that we heard about. It's Eichmann, it's Mengele, it's Walter Rauff, it's Barbie. He smuggled them. And after the war, he was imprisoned in Dachau by the Allies. And he made his way out by disguising as an American officer and simply with a jeep drove out of the Dachau and fled to Spain. And he lived there in a very, very, I would say, wealthy neighborhood, wealthy life. And one day, the Mossad approached him, and he's sure the Mossad is coming to kill him, but they say, no, we don't want to kill you. We want to recruit you.
Oded, thank you so much for joining me as always.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I was recently traveling in Europe over the summer in France, but it was wild for me to see how the war here in Israel, in Gaza, has gone beyond borders. And you're reminded of it really anywhere you go in the world. I mean, I remember being in the train station in Lyon, and a young guy walked past me, and he was wearing a Free Palestine t-shirt. And we were walking around the city center, which is beautiful, actually. I don't know if you've ever been, but there was a Holocaust memorial. And on this Holocaust memorial, you know, memorizing the millions of Jews that were killed during the Holocaust, somebody graffitied a swastika and wrote the word Israel genocide. And I'm just curious to hear from you, you know, how your insight into how the world has sort of weaponized the word genocide and Holocaust and this constant comparison of Nazism and trying to fit it into this conflict.
The narrative is disgusting. It's appalling. It's horrendous. The fact that right now the new Nazism is the new barbarism is Israel, and in fact, Israel is mainly Jews, right? So weaponizing the Nazism in order to portray Israel as the new Nazi, I have no words to describe my feeling towards that, especially where my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and all her family had perished in the war. And the fact that it is being used in such a sleazy and such an instant way is something that puzzles me. How this thing can happen right now, 2025, even in Germany, even in Austria, and needless to say, in all the other places in the world. And in fact, if we are talking about Nazism and Judaism and Israel and Nazis, I came across an incredible story while I served in the Mossad. And I'll tell you how I came across this story. At a certain point, I was a director of training center for operational field officers in the Mossad. And I wanted to bring to my trainees a certain real event that they embed within this event a moral conflict. While you're working in espionage or you're working on secret services, it's very natural that you are encountered in doing all sorts of, I would say, dirty situation or dirty things. You take somebody and you turn him into a spy against his own country, against his own nation, and everything. There are also a lot of moral dilemmas that you are dealing with. And I wanted to bring such a moral dilemma to my trainees. And I asked my secretary, at that time it was an old lady with gray hair, and I told her, listen, Rivka, why don't you hop into the archive and bring me a certain file that I was involved with when I was in the Mossad, and it's encompassed and embedded inside a very, very interesting moral dilemma. Because I wanted to present it to the trainees and to arouse some sort of, I would say, even philosophical discussion about morality working in such an organization. And she went there and she brought me the file, and I was looking at the file, and I called her and I said, listen, this is not what I asked. You brought me another file. She told me this is much better. And I started looking at the file, and I was astonished what I read. I found out that around 1962, the Mossad had actually recruited a Nazi to work as a spy for the Mossad. And the person who had recruited him was a Holocaust survivor. And all the time that he was running this source, he wanted one thing, and that's it, to kill him. But he couldn't, because this was a valuable source. And he had to face a very, very emotional, almost on the verge of an emotional breakdown, running a source that he knew that was a part of the people who had killed his family.
Sounds like the plot of a movie.
Absolutely. It was a fascinating story.
And so by complete accident, you fall on this file.
Completely accident. And then I decided, after I read the whole story, to bring to what we call the Midrasha, the training center, the actual people who took place in this operation, to explain the dilemmas and to explain the operation to the trainees. And they were stunned. There were tears in their eyes of everybody who took part in that session. And what is interesting about this story, it's about one of the most famous Nazis. His name was Otto Skorzeny. He was Hitler's favorite commando fighter. He was the guy who rescued Mussolini from the top of the mountain and brought him to Hitler. He was the guy on the 1944 in the Battle of the Bulge that was disguised as an American and penetrated the Americans' lines and almost changed the course of the war. He was the guy who was who kidnapped the Hungarian leader Horthy and brought him to Hitler. He was about 195 meters tall, which was a giant at the time, with a scar across his face. And after the war, he was imprisoned in Dachau by the Allies, and he made his way out by disguising as an American officer and simply with a jeep drove out of the Dachau and fled to Spain. And he lived there in a very, very, I would say, wealthy neighborhood, wealthy life, conducted his life, and he smuggled to South America all the notorious Nazis that we heard about. It's Eichmann, it's Mengele, it's Walter Rauff, it's Barbie. He smuggled them. And one day, the Mossad approached him, and he's sure the Mossad is coming to kill him, but they say, no, we don't want to kill you. We want to recruit you. And the mission was like a copy-paste from what happened in 1962 to our days. At that time in Egypt, the Egyptians were creating a huge secret factory called the Factory 333 in Khilwan, making ballistic missiles. We are talking about 62, and working on nuclear warheads. And the people who were supposed to engineer that and create them for them were Nazi scientists who fled Germany after the war, and with a lot of lucrative money and terms, became Abd el-Nasser working engineers in order and scientists to create Egypt or facilitate Egypt with the possibility of eradicating Israel. And we are talking as if it was today in Iran.
Right.
And the reason the Mossad turned to this notorious Nazi, Otto Skorzeny, was because he had access to those scientists. There was a huge dilemma within the Mossad. Are we going to approach this Nazi and make him an asset? By that, we actually provide him with life insurance.
Right.
Is it moral? Does it justify the fact that he might provide us some viral information of a project that maybe is going to bring us the next Holocaust, but is it a justification to get him off the hook?
So now you have me really on the edge of my seat. So what happens next?
What happened next, I've written a short novel that tells the first 24 hours of the encounter between this notorious Nazi and a couple of American so-called and Austrian so-called youngsters who encounter with him by coincidence in Spain, in Madrid. And what happens in this 24 hours in these engagements? Of course, those two people were undercover agents of the Mossad, and their mission is to recruit him, and if it fails, to kill him.
And so this is a novel that you wrote, a short novel that you wrote based on the original story. But I'm curious to hear, you mentioned that moral dilemma. And when you're training these trainees to eventually become field officers in the Mossad, what was it like for you bringing this story to them? And what was the moral of the story? How do you teach that moral, balance between using your enemy for your own benefit? How do you calculate that?
I will give you an example from the real events. At a certain period, in the process of recruiting Otto Skorzeny to be an asset for the Mossad, he said, I will do it, but on one condition. And what was the condition? He said, there is the famous Nazi hunter called Simon Wiesenthal, who is in Austria. He has a list of the most notorious Nazis that he's looking for. I'm on the list. If you want me to work for you, you have to go to Wiesenthal and to get me off the list. Otherwise, I'm not working for you.
And so what did the Mossad do?
The Mossad sent this guy, the case officer, the young guy, who, by the way, is a Holocaust survivor with a number tattooed on his hand, and he was supposed to recruit and run Skorzeny, and but he tried to eliminate this number. So in the beginning, because he was undercover, but Skorzeny immediately noticed the number.
So his cover was blown.
His cover was blown, yeah. And so he goes to Wiesenthal. And Wiesenthal knew his family. He was a friend of his family that was perished in the war, and he knocks on Wiesenthal's door on the office one night, and he get in, and he's greeted into this research center that he had created in Vienna, and he tells him the whole story, and he tells him, listen, we need you to get Skorzeny off the list. It's essential. If we don't do that, we have no way to run this operation. It's a risk to the state of Israel. And you know what the Wiesenthal did? Guess.
I want to say he took him off the list.
He kicked him out of his office. He said, under no circumstances, I will get this son of a bitch of my list. It's a disgrace for the state of Israel to run such an asset. It's a disgrace for you as a Holocaust survivor and for your parents who had perished in the war to even ask me for such a demand. And he actually simply threw him out of the office. And the next question, so what did the Mossad do?
Right.
We forged the letter. I brought this issue to my students, to my trainees, and I asked them, what would you do? And I went one by one. And I must tell you, it was undecided. Half of them said, I would not do it under any circumstances. And half of them said, listen, the cause justifies the means, and we have to do it. And by the way, down the road if we're talking about the real story, Skorzeny was demanded to kill himself, some of the scientists, and he did it.
Wow. Some of the Egyptian scientists
who were working on the missile project.
We already have Tarantino on the line.
In 1975, long after the operation had ended and they had separated, and our guy even left the Mossad and was doing private business and stuff like that, he gets a call from Spain, and on the line is Skorzeny's wife, and she tells him, listen, Otto Skorzeny is dying of cancer in Madrid, and before he dies, he wants to see you. And he was puzzled because she reached him and his real name.
Wow.
His cover was blown.
His cover was majorly blown.
And he asked permission from the Mossad if he's allowed to travel to Spain to see it, to see him, to talk with him. And although the Mossad was a bit reluctant about that, they finally approved that he can go. And he went, he flew to Madrid and rushed to the hospital, and they told him Skorzeny died 5 hours ago.
And so he never got to have his final word.
He never had a chance to see him. But he went to the funeral, and they conducted a funeral in Madrid, Nazi style. All his friends, the Nazis, were standing on the coffin with all his medals, all the swastikas, and they were saluting in a Nazi style, and he was standing with them. Nobody knew who he was. And when everybody left, he took a small piece of stone in a Jewish style and put it on his grave.
What does that say to you? The fact that despite all that time, despite all the things that this horrific man had done, he still chose to honor his last wish, go to him in his final moments. And even though he didn't make it, on time to actually be able to exchange a word with him, but that symbol of taking a stone, which in the Jewish faith is a way of honoring the dead, and putting it on his tombstone, what does that say to you about that moral dilemma?
This express the difference between us, the Jewish people, the Israelis, and our adversaries, and all those people abroad right now or across Europe who make this appalling resemblance between us and the Nazis. This is the difference. We can have moral dilemmas, and the moral dilemmas are imminent. They're even embedded in every Jew. It's not something that we go into Gaza and we eradicate Gaza, happily ever after, and we have no any sort of second thought or moral dilemmas. But in the end of the day, our existence here in this tough neighborhood can only with jihadic people who have no moral dilemmas. They have only one goal, is to eliminate the existence of the Jewish nation. They don't want.
There was no moral dilemma on October 7th.
There's no moral dilemmas. They don't want a two-state solution.
Right.
And I think this story amplifies the big difference between what we see today and who we really are.
Oded Ailam, thank you so much for bringing to us a pearl of a story. I can't wait to see the movie.
Me too. Thank you.